When you purchase your orchid, you bring it home and all of the blooms fall off. You might be asking yourself, what in the world do I do with these long sticks that are left on my orchid? Do I cut them? Do I trim them down? Do I leave them alone? What happens with them? And the truth is you really never know what your orchid is going to do with your stem. It's good to just see what happens and experiment with some different orchids. If you do decide that you want to cut the flower spike on your orchid, it is recommended to cut above the second knuckle. And when I say knuckle, I am talking about these little breaks here that you're going to see in your flower spike, and cut right above that knuckle. Because if a new flower spike is going to grow from the original spike, it's going to grow at the knuckle area. And so they recommend, what I've read online, is to cut above that second one there. So if you look at this here, he has a knuckle right here. And then we have the second knuckle here, and I've cut above that second knuckle, and I've cut it on both of the flower spikes that this particular orchid had. When you do that, it can grow a new flower spike from that knuckle. I have had orchids in the past that I have cut above that second knuckle, and they have grown a new flower spike that has shot out from that knuckle here and has grown new flowers. Here's an example of one that I have allowed the stem to just stay put. And what ended up happening is a little tiny baby orchid grew from that spike, and then it produced its own flower spike, the baby orchid, which you can see here. That has since bloomed, and I cut that, wondering what would happen to that, and then it decided to grow its own flower spike from the baby. So here's an example of something that can happen if you just leave that flower spike alone. It might just produce a new baby orchid. Something else that might happen if you decide to leave it alone is that the spike decides to die. So we see here is a spike that was once blooming flowers. I left it there to see what would happen, and then I eventually cut it, and it just died completely. It decided not to do anything. And as you can see now, it has a brand new flower spike that's coming out the top, which is going to be producing blooms very shortly. Here's an example of one that I decided to cut the flower spike completely down. That's this down here. It's an old flower spike that I cut all the way down, and we can see that that's okay. It decided to grow a completely new flower spike, which will be blooming very soon. And then last but not least, I did want to show this one here, where I also cut the last flower spike all the way to the end. It ended up growing a new flower spike anyway, which grew a baby orchid, which also grew its own flower spike that also bloomed, that I've since cut back. But you can see here, it is growing a new flower spike from the base orchid. So I always recommend having like maybe 4 or 5 orchids and just experimenting with the flower spikes on each one. Maybe cut some of them, leave some alone, cut some all the way down, and just see what happens. I will say though, if you do see that it is turning dried up and dead looking like that, that means that nothing is going to come from that flower spike again. So you are okay to go ahead and cut that all the way down to the end. But have fun with your orchids, experiment with the different flower spikes, and see what can happen.